The number one question I get is, should I get a Rolex Submariner or a Datejust? So today I'm going to try and answer that question for you. This is going to be the ultimate guide on deciding between these two watches. Also, if you didn't know, I do have an Instagram channel with a lot of photos of the Datejust and the Submariner. If you want to see me wearing the watch behind the scenes, out and about, see what it looks like on my wrist, that's the best place to check out the watches. Here's my handle, it's simply Submariner. I'm gonna link it down below and you can check it out. We are going to cover a range of topics like weight, size, proportions, what you like to wear, and what you like to do on the weekends and weekday. A little bit of background about these watches. I've had this 40mm Rolex Submariner for probably 7 or 8 years now. So this is the ceramic 40mm Submariner, and this is a more recent piece. This is a 36mm Rolex Datejust with a mint green dial. And I realize that these are two very different watches, but I still get a lot of questions from you asking if you should go with a 36mm watch or a 40mm watch, and if you should go Jubilee or Oyster, if you should go sporty or dressy. So I'm gonna try and answer all those questions for you here today. Now, clearly I couldn't decide between the two, and that's why I have both. So this is not gonna make it easier for you, but having owned these watches now, I'm going to tell you which one I would get if I could only pick one. So we're gonna start with weight. The Rolex Submariner is going to be a lot heavier than the Datejust. You will feel a significant difference in the Submariner. Having said that, you will get used to it and you will start to prefer a heavier watch. And then the Datejust is a little bit lighter. It feels a little more comfortable, and you get used to that as well. But having both watches, you kind of like the heaviness and you kind of like having a light watch. So you really can't go wrong, but the heavy watch does feel a little more premium. In terms of proportions, I will say that the Rolex 36mm Datejust has a lot better proportions. It sits a lot nicer, it fits a lot nicer, it goes under the cuff a lot nicer. The 40mm I think still has decent proportions, but it's been known to be a little too square compared to the previous model and now the new 41mm. So the 36 takes the cake on this one in terms of proportions. The 40 is kind of known to be the perfect size for most people, but this kind of squared off generation of the Submariner puts some people off, but now it's kind of become a bit of a unicorn. People kind of like the 40 better than the 41. I thought the 41 was a little long and maybe a little bit taller even. The bracelet is also a lot bigger on the 41 than the 40, and it's a lot longer than the Datejust. So something to consider. It is a lot longer, but it's not offensive. A lot of you ask about the bracelet, whether you should get an Oyster or a Jubilee bracelet. Now these are two different bracelets. It's going to be preferential, but I'll tell you how I interpret them and what I think of them. The Oyster I actually find a lot more classier. It also handles scratches really well. I don't know if that's just the way they did the finish. It's not polished. It's more satin. The Jubilee is also known to hide a lot of scratches because of the design. You don't see a whole lot of scratches here because of the little micro beads on the bracelet. So they both are pretty scratch resistant in terms of hiding those scratches. But I think the Oyster kind of takes the cake on this one, even though I love the Jubilee, and is really why I got the Datejust, because I really like the way the Jubilee looks. I still kind of would prefer the Oyster. I don't know why, it's a little bit more timeless than the Jubilee. But they're both beautiful. It's hard to pick one here. It's gonna be preferential, but I do like the Oyster. Even though it's a little more basic, you can find this on a lot of more cheaper, just kind of mall watches. You know, on a Citizen, you can find this on Timex. You can find this kind of style on many different watches. This one you can't, so it does have a premium on it when you go to the dealer. In terms of color, the Submariner is way easier to wear. it matches with everything and it looks so sharp. The mint green is a little bit tougher to wear, but you just throw it on and it's gonna look good no matter what. It doesn't matter what you're wearing, but it does seem to clash with some colors. I think blue and green don't really go well together. So those are kind of hard to wear, and I like to wear a lot of blue, especially navy, but I still do it anyways. You just go ahead and wear it. In terms of your style, if you're dressy or dressed down, you both can't go wrong with either of these, but I do feel like the Submariner can kind of tackle both really well. In terms of price, I actually paid more for the Datejust than I did for the Submariner because of the inflation, because it was like 7 years later that I got it. But I think the Submariner does have a premium on the secondary market. So if you're looking for kind of resale value or see which one holds its value better, definitely the Submariner. But I still think that I would get most of my money, if not all of it, back if I were to sell this Datejust. So in terms of price retention, they're both going to be great, but I think the Submariner will retain a little bit more value. Another really important thing to note is that if you're going to get a Datejust, it's really important to get the correct features. What I mean by that is a Jubilee bracelet, a fluted bezel, and a colorful or motif dial. You can't get black, white, or silver. Those won't hold their value as much. And you can't get a dome bezel and an oyster bracelet. The other features, they demand a premium and they hold their value a lot better. So if you care about that stuff, you need to go for Jubilee, fluted bezel, and a colorful or motif dial like blue, green, or the pattern dials. And the last topic I'm going to cover is which one gets more attention. And this can be a good thing or a bad thing. You don't want to attract too much attention to yourself nowadays because there are a lot of theft going on. Luckily not in my city that I've heard of. But you might also be looking for attention from your friends, your peers, or whatnot. Not that you should, but I will tell you that the Datejust does get a lot more attention. People seem to recognize a lot more. They think it's a lot more shiny, more sparkly, and then the Submariner. The Submariner is kind of like a everyday watch. You can find this design in many different brands. And I also find that women tend to gravitate more towards the Datejust, and men tend to notice the Submariner a lot more. But this is not the reason I bought them. I just really enjoy having these in my collection, and I'm going to continue wearing them for many years to come. So hopefully that made it easier for you to decide. I know it probably didn't answer a lot of your questions, but if you were to ask me which watch I would get if I could only get one, if I could only afford one, it would be the Submariner, hands down. I think it feels premium. I think it wears really well with many different outfits, whether you're dressed up for the office or going out on the weekend. And so the Submariner takes the crown on this one. I would still very much love to wear a Datejust. It was actually my dream watch before I saw the Submariner, and then I kind of like deviated, which they say is you should always go for the watch you initially really wanted, which is what happened here. You know, I bought the Submariner and then I went out and bought the Datejust because it's the watch that I really, really wanted. But having spent time with both of these watches now, I would definitely wear the Submariner a lot more and buy this as my first watch. So hope that helps. See you in the next one.